We're talking about this morning in terms of our values and what we value as a team. This is a team sport as well. Is one of the things we're talking about was trust and how you trust your teammates. You know, just talk to me a little bit about, was that a factor? Was that kind of the culture? Because look, we've all probably heard about elite teams and everybody's a great player, but you know, just from the relationships between the players, how does that play out to turn you into actual champions?
So there's a group called the senior leaders or senior players group, you know, and they have to, in terms of a rugby team at least, embody the values and live them every day. And that, because of the position they are in, often merited, right, to be a senior player, that spreads through the rest of the group, you know, that dilutes down, and then you find yourself actioning those values that those guys are leading through every day. So that's, now you can clearly do that without them as well, but you know, in terms of a group mentality, like, that's incredibly important, that the people who are in those senior leader, senior player roles in rugby are embodying them every day, because we're, as kind of the followers, if you want, the player, we're all looking up to them, you know, and they're the ones who set that standard, and that's what was done incredibly well, not just by them. I think it had got to a point that when I arrived, at least, that everyone, it was very, very rare if somebody wasn't, and so those guys have to be. So trust is a tough value, because it takes this step. You have to give space for another person to step into that trust. You can't just say, trust me, and somebody's going to trust you. It just doesn't work like that, unfortunately, right? There has to be space given. So that's what those guys were really good at. You know, they weren't on everyone's case all the time, like, live this value, you know, we said we would be integral, or, you know, didn't work like that. They actioned it out. They embodied it every day, or at least they endeavored to embody it every day. And if people see that, I think then they can get behind it. And that was very much the case with trust.
Yeah. So professional rugby, obviously a very, very tough career, right? And a lot of rugby players go to be estate agents, insurance brokers, you know, stockbrokers, you know, and you arrive home and said, I'm going to be an adventurer. How did that go down?
Well, it was very much a case of planned. So, like, I was very clear on what I wanted to do after rugby for about 7 or 8 years before. So I retired at 35. So kind of the end of my 20s, you know, I knew that it wasn't a case of it being a career at that point. It was just, these were things I wanted to do with my life. I knew that they were going to give me something very rich and empowering, and they were going to, like, grow me as a person. And that's kind of my mindset, you know, has been since I was 17. Well, what's really going to fulfill me as a person? So I started to prepare then, and what was clear to me was nobody's going to pay you to be an adventurer. So to prepare, I just started saving. Like, so I started putting quite a bit of my monthly wage away, because I knew that these things were going to cost money. Like, right, running across the Sahara, not hugely taxing on the pocket, but rowing the Atlantic, incredibly taxing, you know. So I just wanted to, again, make sure that I was in a position to do these things, because they were so important to me. And then, yeah, when I wasn't going around broadcasting this. I wasn't telling anyone, really. If people asked me, like, what's next, and I'd be saying, oh, things I want to do, like, that was it, you know. I wasn't giving away anything. I just feel that and I've heard this and kind of backed up, is that by kind of broadcasting your goals, you actually get a bit of a dopamine hit. So it actually weakens your intention towards those goals. So I was very much, I didn't know that, of course. It was just a natural feeling I had that, you know, I think I should keep these things kind of quiet. Also because, like, there's always a bit of discussion, like, what, you know, and I didn't really have the energy to be kind of fighting my corner around the kind of things I wanted to do. I just knew they were important to me, and I was going to do them, even if I couldn't justify or kind of clearly articulate my why at that point. So yeah, when I was 35, I unfortunately this left knee kind of gave out that season, and it was clear enough, like, this is my last season. So I sat down and I institutionalized through rugby about making goals, right? So I made a new goals list that said I was entitled, before I am 40, I will, and then I had 7 endings to that sentence. So before I am 40, I will complete the Marathon des Sables, which is known as the world's toughest foot race. It's a 257-kilometer ultra marathon across the Sahara Desert, self-supported. So you carry everything on your back you need to survive from the start. Like, so all your clothing, all your meals, all your food, all your cooking utensils, bedding, any sort of paraphernalia you might need, like scorpion bite kits, snake bite kits. So so I made that list, and that was me for the next 5 years. As far as I was concerned, I was in a position at least to take on these things, and just set about that, and that was enough. That was enough for me at that point.
Right. And was the Sahara Run the first adventure post rugby?
It was, yeah.
So you're there running through the desert. Said, "What did you at any point say, why am I doing this?" Or were the goals so clear that they were above any doubts you had during this?
So clear and so purposeful. So for example, like the Sahara Desert Run, like, I discovered that as a thing in 2003, watching a documentary by 3 Galway brothers called the O'Donovan brothers, who completed it. I was just scrolling through like late night television, and came on this thing on TG Cahir, and I was like, what's going on here? And I just started watching it. I was like, I'm going to do that someday. And I was always looking outside of rugby. Like, I was very focused on being a better rugby player. And I was always, well, what are people doing? Okay, I've good systems around me here internally in the rugby clubs I'm in, but what are other people doing to get better in physical pursuits? So, I was looking at things as diverse as like bodybuilding for putting on mass, because they're the best in the world at putting on mass, to like ultra runners, and they're probably the best in the world at controlling their mind in states of enduring stress. So I was trying to pick from all these things, and that would work for me, that won't work, whatever, just finding bits of information. So, these things had been in my head for quite a while, and put on lists, and then I just come back to them when I retired, because rugby was my be all and end all, and I was going to like make the absolute most of that. But once that chapter was done, it was firmly closed, and it was moving on to what the next one was. And so there was no doubts. These things are very meaningful and purposeful for me. And, I have a great understanding about difficulty. Like, the harder something is, as long as it's through a purposeful kind of direction, the better. The more, if you can get through it, the more you're going to grow from it. So, I never get to points where I'm like, oh my God, this is so fucking hard. I wish, it doesn't exist for me. I'm like, great.
Wow.
I am grateful for the hardship, because I know I'm going to get great stuff from it.
Very good. And so you talk a lot about goal setting. How important was that to everything you've achieved?
Yeah, really, really important. I particularly on that list, just it gives so much direction in, like, because you're going to be faced with decisions along these journeys, along these campaigns or projects, and having a clearly stated, ambitious goal gives that direction. So you can come back to that and use it to find the answer that you need. So yeah, I completed 4 of those 7 goals. Now I do this all the time at goal stretch, and I always kind of overreach a little bit, but as long as I'm content with the actions to get to where I want to get and achieve what I want to achieve, and then analyze what I don't, so when it comes to the end of the goal period, because a time frame is really important, that you put that on a goal. When it comes to an end of that period, well, then reflect brutally, honestly, well, why did I not get there? Because that's information you can use in the next time you set the next goal that you're going towards, to give yourself the best chance to get to that.
So just talk then for how you got from running the Sahara to mountain climbing to rowing the Atlantic. How did you pick your next thing? You know, or did you know what your next event after the desert run was going to be before you started it, or how do you think and plan through these things?
So I had that, you know, 7 endings to that sentence. So the big scary one on that post the Sahara was to row solo and unsupported across the Atlantic, because that's an enormous campaign, you know, and there's loads of things within that were totally out of my comfort zone. Like, so where's my strength here? Well, it's clearly in preparing my body physically and my mind mentally to, you know, pursue these goals. But I had no maritime experience. I had minimal rowing experience, and the rowing experience I had was on the indoor ergometer. So it's quite different, right, to raging waves. Yeah. And I can't swim. So those 3 things.
Off to a great start.
Right?
Off to a great start.
You talk about being overwhelmed by a goal. Like, you know, you're looking at those 3 things, you're like, wow. So this is, you know, that's why it was so scary, you know. But there's something within that itself, like, you know, as long as, you know, the goal isn't unachievable, I think, you know, there's no harm in having a goal that is a little bit scary. So yeah, I just said about then, okay, well, what do you want to achieve? And then I just reverse engineered from there, you know, and all the different components of the campaign. So there was clearly the physical and mental and even emotional preparation. So I feel pretty confident around that. But then there was the fundraising I was absolutely not confident about and didn't even know where to start, you know. And then there was the charity campaign on the side of it. So and then the technical side as well, you know, so like boats and all, and this trying to decipher this new language, like this maritime language I'd never really heard before. So much so that I went out to the start of another ocean row the year before. I had targeted to leave, and there was 2 people on their boats. It was in one of the Canary Islands. So this ocean row that I did went from that Canary Island, which is La Gomera, all the way to Antigua. So I was kind of picking their brains and trying to get as much information out of them. And I was standing, but 2 people were on their boats. Actually, a Galway guy here, Gavin Hennigan, and a lady from Scotland, and they were chatting away. And I was like, geez, I don't really know what they're talking about. And then one of them said, because they were using all this language, you know, and one of them said to the other, sure, Elaine, you didn't even have you only bought your boat as a hull, didn't you? And I was sitting there going, what is a hull? I did. That's how ignorant I was of like maritime stuff. But you know, you figure it out. If it means enough to you, you kind of hang in there and you figure it out. And you know, you learn to kind of decipher all that kind of information or all that language that you don't kind of know at one time, and then, yeah, obviously use it. So it took me 19 months from commitment to the start to bring all those kind of components of the campaign together. And I was, so that was the ocean row. And then once I kind of actually, just before I was about to land in Antigua, you know, you kind of get to this point where you feel comfortable enough to think about what's next, like without taking your eye off the ball of achieving that one. So it was literally only a day or 2, my mind started to kind of wander, and there was 2 things that came up for me. There was the 7 summits, which is the highest mountain on each continent. I had climbed Kilimanjaro during one of my off seasons from rugby, because that's, you know, what I do. Most people go to Dubai. I went to Tanzania to climb mountain, but and I really struggled up that mountain. Now I was fit for purpose in terms of playing rugby, not fit for purpose for mountaineering. But I got to the top, and it was very challenging. But also it created this kind of, you know, fear of other mountains, because, you know, there's a scale in how they measure high altitude mountaineering. And if Kilimanjaro is a 1A, Everest is a 5E. So it's based on difficulty and technicality, the 2 metrics. So I was on the easiest high altitude peak in the world, and I really struggled. So then thinking about doing the 7 summits, I was like, whoa, you know. But then that's what drew me towards it, because the other option I had was another ocean row. The one I subsequently did from New York to Galway. But I just thought at that point, because of that reaction to the thought of mountaineering, well, that's what I should go towards. That's what I should approach. I had three options there, avoid, accept, or approach, and I approached it. So over the last it was a bit disrupted because of COVID, but over the last 3 years I've completed 5 of them. I was on Everest in the spring summer of 2021, got COVID while I was there, recovered while I was there, got evacuated to Kathmandu, flew back up to the mountain, just like a very, very, very challenging physically expedition and emotionally, because I just left my partner with our first child, was just born. It was crazy circumstances, but recovered, somehow kind of started to feel a bit stronger, even though I had clearly a respiratory illness at high altitude. It's not a great combination. And I'm not built for high altitude mountaineering either, because the more mass you have, the more oxygen they need. The higher you go, the less oxygen there is. So, it just was incredibly challenging, but I just kept telling myself, just hang in there, hang in there, hang in there. All of a sudden, kind of week 6, week 7 of the expedition, started to feel a bit stronger, started to kind of get a modicum of confidence going, oh, do you know what? You could maybe there's something here. Maybe you can achieve something. This isn't just climbing Everest. This is climbing Everest with COVID, basically. So maybe you can achieve that. And I just got a bit of energy from that possibility and the kind of the clear about turn on my physical capacity. So I was like, oh, hang in there. And then got to a stage where we were just 45 minutes. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. We were at base camp. I was fully geared up. All my stuff was ready. We were going on our summit rotation. It's a 5-day rotation, starting from base camp to the summit, obviously, and back down. We're about to go through the Khumbu Icefall, which is the most treacherous part. So I'm teeming with that nervous anticipation, that it's difficult to deal with, but if you can kind of reframe it, you can use it really well. And I got a tap on my shoulder going, can I have a word from the head of the climbing operator? And he's like, sorry to tell you this, but we've just heard from Camp 2 and Camp 4, and everybody has COVID. So we're taking them all off the mountain, shutting down the expedition. So, so I never even got a chance to really experience Everest. I got as far as just below Camp 3, but all the real kind of famous parts of the mountains I didn't even get a chance to see. So it's definitely something I have ambitions to go back and attempt at some point. But I moved on pretty quickly after that.
Another day. What's really interesting to me is you have a 19-month preparation before you get in the boat to row across the Atlantic. And obviously that's a solo effort while you're in the boat. But talk to me about the team around you and the amount of logistics and planning, because as a rugby player, I'm sure your day is planned for you. Your year is planned. Somebody else is doing that kind of thinking. So was that a big challenge to come into planning and owning that plan and building the team around you, where somebody else was responsible for building that team in the past?
Yeah, very much so. Particularly when it comes to, we'll come back to trust, right? And finding people in terms of the sections of the project that nothing about. I don't know anything about building an ocean rowing boat, and I don't have time, so you gotta kind of you gotta find somebody who you trust, and secondly are going to own that part of the expedition and do what's right. So those people I find are quite challenging to find, and there's no real clear way of identifying them. Where I've come to hang my hat around that sort of stuff is any people who are putting their heart and soul into their what they do. The guy we ended up linking up with, who built our ocean rowing boat for my latest expedition, Justin Adkins, is a guy he's one guy. There's other people out there much more prevalent, marketed better. Justin is one guy in a shed in Devon. He builds 2 boats a year. Our build, because he hand built it, took him 13 months, but he loves what he does, and he is so obsessed. Like, he'll go into these monologues about ocean rowboats, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, like, you know, but I just see the passion in him, you know, and I know what he is doing is going to serve the bigger project. So that's kind of where I try and find that in, or identify that in individuals to bring into the team, because I feel there's huge value in working with people like that and aligning with that attitude and that mindset and that love for what they do, you know. And the biggest kind of image I can give you of that is, so I finished, some people might know this story, but I finished this ocean row on the rocks in Furbo. Massive storm from the south, 35 knot winds. I just didn't have the power coming in Galway Bay to fight against it, and I just got pushed and pushed onto the rocks, and eventually got washed up on the rocks after trying to avoid a couple of kind of unseen rock outcrops and getting capsized. And anyway, the boat got washed onto the rocks, right? It was 1 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, I clearly have to get off. This is kind of dangerous. Every kind of, the wash of every wave would like shudder the boat further up onto the rocks, and it would like grinding against the rocks. And it was, I was like, so I jumped off the boat. Different story, but just to give you some imagery, my legs didn't work because I've been on an ocean rowing boat for 112 days. So I had to crawl across the rocks. Eventually got to a safe space. I was able to make a couple of phone calls using a broadband satellite uplink, even though I was like 7 miles from my house. Like, I was used to, and yeah, right. And I rang Chris, who was our weather router, another guy who's very passionate about what he does and loves what he does. And, you know, but anyway, Chris and Justin had come to Galway. They're both Englishmen. Had come to Galway for the arrival. So they were out staying in Gussie's house, my partner, who left on day 13 in Athenry. So they drove to Furbo that night, and they got there at the boat about 2:30. Justin wanted to have a look, see what was happening, see if he could do anything, because the boat was just getting smashed against the rocks, right? And then a family here from Galway, the Olivers as well, who are involved in the lifeboat, they were coming out to me when I put up, but then they got turned around because the weather was so bad. And they drove out to Furbo at 4 o'clock in the morning, put some rocks around, or tires around the rocks to try and mitigate. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that boat got smashed around the rocks for 12 hours and it floated off the rocks the next day. That's because Justin put so much effort into the detail and quality into the detail of what he does. Like, there's any other ocean rowing boat, it would have been in smithereens, because he loves what he does. He put so much time into it. It floated off the next day. They dragged it into the docks, and then I was able to row it in the last like 200 meters.
That's a proper Galway welcome. You know,
it was
hammered off the rock 7 miles from home. Fantastic. So talk to us about your most recent trip. You know, because it started with two of you in the boat, didn't it?
Yeah, a good friend of mine. It wasn't long until it was one. Yeah, he's still a friend. Yeah. But you know, we put like 2 years kind of work together into that. And Gussie, who my partner, has his own amazing story. My rowing partner, sorry, yeah, but he has his own amazing story, like where he was paralyzed from the waist down in a workplace accident in 2018, and he was given a 5% chance to ever regain any sensation below his belly button. Like, wow. And he defied all the prognoses and regathered or found the sensation in his legs, and then regathered his mobility and relearned to walk, and went on this amazing journey where he went into the National Rehabilitation Hospital in Dunleary on his back, and 16 weeks later he walked out, very wobbly, but he walked out, and that's the goal he set himself.
That doesn't happen too often there.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's not a very it's not a very hopeful place, like, you know, it's but again, his attitude was very much like that. He wasn't going to accept the prognoses, and that was important, you know, and it was a big factor in me choosing him, because I knew I was going to need a certain type of kind of character and mindset to take on this. Like, so the North Atlantic is a different beast altogether. Like, it's just a ferocious body of water, and there's no the first ocean row I did, the opposite direction from east to west. There's a thing called the trade winds. So there's these winds, you know, that are consistently blowing from east to west, and they help. Like that's how Columbus would have got across. That's how any sailboats go across, you know, so they help a boat. Whereas the North Atlantic, there's no trade winds. It's all these kind of same weather we get here. It's all this kind of, you know, that's why we get it off the Atlantic, right? All these kind of inconsistent, localized weather patterns. So I knew it was going to be like way more difficult. So I knew I needed somebody of a certain kind of caliber and outlook. And seeing him go through that journey and just his mindset throughout it, I asked him, did he want to be part of it? So we put in 2 years work. It's just unfortunate, like I take a bit of responsibility around this. I thought I was a bit of a blind spot for me. And a learning I've taken from this expedition is that I thought I could prepare him, even though he doesn't really have much expedition kind of experience. I thought I could prepare him physically, mentally, and emotionally to take on this like thing that's taken me 25 years to get to a point to try and take it on. And I was incorrect, you know. So he just didn't have the capacities. And, you know, his history played a big role in that as well. And it was kind of an unseen thing. But yeah, after day 13, he had to be medically evacuated because his O2 sats were dropped to 86 at sea level. So, I mean, normally, okay, that's a bit of a concern. But when he tells you that he was rushed into ICU post his surgery in the mater spinal unit with low O2 sats, you're kind of like, oh, right.
You need to get off the boat.
We need to get you off this boat ASAP. Yeah.
So you're sitting there in the boat made for two, right? And what was your thought process then about what you do when there's a helicopter coming out to pull somebody off the boat, and you're in a boat made for two? Had you ever thought through this scenario that you end up on in a two-man boat rowing yourself?
Strangely, I kind of indirectly had considered it, because throughout the campaign, I was trying to get the project campaign, I was trying to get Gussie to take more responsibility for the project, because I saw threats in the way he was thinking. He was very much letting me lead Everton, and you just can't. It's very dangerous on an ocean road to abdicate any sort of responsibility, because that's that lazy kind of way of thinking can mean that you are not armed for the threats that are coming. In this case, they're life-threatening, right? So I'm like, Jesus, I need him to start thinking more in terms of the broad project and his ownership of it. So I started to kind of send them like questions, you know, just consider this happening, Gussie. Like, I am knocked down in New York. I'm fine, but I'm knocked. I can't go on the row. You have to go on your own. Thinking that if he thinks like that, he'll see the holes in his preparation and then he'll start to fill them in, right? So I was constantly kind of do that. And then indirectly, I started to consider it myself. Well, what if Gussie doesn't make it? So when it came to the point of day 13 and he's evacuated, like, oh, it was hard. It was sad. It was emotionally kind of upsetting, like, because we put so much into it together. But I never actually considered getting off the boat myself. It didn't even enter my mind. In fact, we had a tracker on board, and the tracker had it was a thing called the Garmin InReach, and it has a kind of text message service on it. And about 2 days later, we announced that he was taken off the boat, and I started getting all these messages. Oh, I can't believe you continued. And that was the first time I actually considered it. I was like, I never even entered my mind. You know, it's a very important thing for me, very meaningful. I saw it as a bit of a legacy piece in my life, you know, that, you know, I grew up on these streets, and I can, you know, I think imagery can be so powerful, like, you know, like real life, somebody striving to do something very difficult. So I kind of saw it as a, you know, us rowing into Galway Bay, and then anybody who's looking, particularly the next generation of Galwegians or Irish kids, that imagery could ignite something in them, could get them to pursue their things that are important in their life passionately. So like that was a powerful driver for me. Like, so very much I was driven to get it done no matter what. So of course you had to go. And you know, if I'm being honest, I actually was, once we kind of got over the emotional part of the fact that he was going to leave, I was quite cold about it. I was like, well, now you got to go, kind of thing. Yeah.
Off you go. Bye.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but like, and you know, if I analyze that, it was because I was so daunted about what was ahead and that the unknown of that. And I'm very much like, the mind can be, so anytime there's an unknown, there's fear, right? And fear can be very manipulative on the mind, and it can take you into all sorts of places and stories that may never and probably will never come true. So I was thinking, I need to get into this body of work that I am quite daunted and fearful of, just to experience it and to approach it. So that was very much my thinking, like, well, you know, I got to get on with things. I've got 2,500 nautical miles to go, like, and you know, the longer I'm sitting here with you, the more dangerous it is, really. So let's get you off the boat.
So was there a certain amount of relief he was gone because you were now in control?
There was, yeah, absolutely, yeah,
right.
Yeah. Actually, you're the first person who's ever said that to me. It's quite insightful, but yeah, no, there was.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, no, it was very much like now I for me as well, and it was something I was trying to, like, it's a tricky one, right? Because like I have to focus on myself in these endeavors, because it's very dangerous if your focus is drifting to other people, and then you take, you know, it heightens the risk of you making a mistake, which could mean, you know, you're not coming home. Like, and the way I kind of try, and the people who are actually sacrificed most in this is the people closest to me. Like, it's very, very selfish of me to ask them to go through that. Like, because I remember at the end of my rugby career sitting in the stands, and when you're not playing, it's way worse. Like, when you're not in control. Like, so I just thinking about them, like sitting at home for months watching this little dot going, Jesus, I hope he's okay. So it was very much a case of like, I understanding that the more I focus on Gussie, the less I focus on myself, the more I heighten my risk of not coming home. And, you know, I'm not doing these things to have any sort of like death wish, you know, I'm doing them to get the most out of my life, you know, and realize my potential. So when he was gone, it was very much a case of like, yeah, well, that, you know, now I don't have to be looking at him and watching him and making sure he doesn't get knocked off the boat, or, you know, yeah.
And with such a focus and persistence, do you ever see a danger in too much persistence, right? Because we kind of think of business as we're going to enter that market, we're going to win there, right? And then after a while, you know what? Maybe you're not going to win here. Maybe your blind persistence is sometimes your best ally. Sometimes it's, you know, I know businesses that are going 12, 13 years trying to enter a particular market. It's not going to happen. So have you a framework to think through dangerous persistence as well for yourself?
I feel that sometimes acceptance is the key here, right? So when do you make the decision to accept you're not going to get to where you want to get to? But we're too quick to, generally, we're too quick to accept. And I feel and mindset of non-acceptance, or at least stress testing the acceptance from all different angles, is key here. Now, as you said, it might drive you mad, but you might actually get to achieve what you want to achieve, or then you might get some clarity on this thing being futile, right? So for me, actually, this became quite a clear realization in my own mindset, this kind of attitude of non-acceptance. Like, just because somebody says it means nothing to me, you know. I still have to stress test this thing. So on day 56 of the Ocean Row, I went over 1,000 nautical miles to go to Galway mark, and I gave myself 30 days to achieve that. I felt like I could achieve that in 30 days. I was clearly wrong, right? But I didn't get clarity on that until I had like absolutely stress tested it to the maximum. So even with I remember like 15, 16 days to go, I still had like 700 nautical miles, and I still kind of believed that I could make up that ground in 15 or 16 days and achieve that goal. I gave myself up 30 days. Then it came to a point where I was like, clearly, like, you can't. So that's when I accepted it, but not until that point. Because we can be, again, coming back to the mind and how fragile it actually is. It can be corrupted so easily that you can make up stories to yourself without kind of pushing at all the angles. You can make up stories where you will accept things too early, and you can give up on things that you can actually achieve. So it's just a case of like having contentment within yourself that you've pushed on every angle and it's actually not achievable physically for me in this case in the time frame. And when that was clear, and then another couple of days of frustration because I still don't give up on it, and then when it's doubly clear, then I go, okay, well, that's just, and you know, that's just not going to happen. So
we call it rebaselining a project,
right?
Yeah, where we just change the plan.
Yeah.
But in terms of spending 112 days on a boat on your own, when you end up on the rocks, Furbo Beach, obviously, you know, your legs aren't working, but you'd spent so much time in your own mind. Right. Talk to us about readjusting to having humans about, having land, you know, but getting your land legs back again. How have you found that?
It's been beautiful. Comfort, like there's hardly a shred of comfort on an ocean rowing boat. So comfort, choice, like I don't have to get, like I had no choice. If I wanted to get to go, I had to row like 10, 11 hours a day. Now I have choice. I don't have to row 10 or 11 hours a day. Great. So those two things, of course, been back around family and having like not like I was eating cold, dehydrated rations for 88 days because I lost my boiler heater of a thing called the jet boil. I lost 2 of them actually overboard. So, you know, now I'm not eating out of a bag. I'm actually eating food I enjoy, you know, so it's been great. And it doesn't take as long as you might think. I don't know if this is a personal thing or whatever, but apart from this latest expedition, I've never really had a transitionary period back into where I feel, you know, connected and in touch with Everton. So there was 2 days post the most recent, just this at Ocean Row, where it was like totally head spinning. It was like I was kind of, I can't really explain it very well because I'm not too sure what was going on, but it was like I was kind of outside of myself, or I wasn't connected with myself emotionally. I was there, I was present, I was polite, I was smiling, but like there was no humanness to it, you know. It was almost like a woodenness to it. So, but that was only 48 hours, and then it was very much I was back into kind of normal, kind of just myself, felt better about myself, or felt more connected with myself. But I'd never had that before. I've normally just been able to switch back in. We're just such adaptable creatures, you know, that personally anyway, I've not really struggled with that. And it's particularly ocean rowing because you just like, for 97% of it, you just don't want to be on. Like Everton is uncomfortable. You don't want to be on that boat. So like when you're very much at the end and it's time to get off, you're like, great, I'm not getting on with them again for a while. Like,
was there anything that you particularly wanted to eat? What was in your mind that the first thing I'm going to eat when I really settle back in? What was that?
Coffee actually was a big thing for me. Came up.
You brought no coffee on the boat?
I did bring coffee, but the first like 50-60 days was really, really hot because you're you're leaving New York in summertime, and it's not something you particularly feel like drinking, you know, a hot cup of coffee when it's like 40 degrees in your little cabin or 30 degrees outside. And then by the time it got kind of cold and I got more into the northern latitudes, I'd lost my jet boiler, so I couldn't boil water. So I mean, as much as I wanted coffee, I didn't want cold granule coffee. So that wasn't a thing. Yeah, and anything like salty, because the last 12 days, I think I lost my last spoon. So these long handled spoons for eating out of the bags, right? So the one, I got this big wave overboard and it kind of filled the whole deck. And there's these little things on the side called scuppers. and I had the spoon beside the scupper. And what I presume happened was the volume of water, it was so much that it actually opened the scupper enough, and it just sucked the spoon out with it. And I couldn't find it, right? And it was my last one. So that meant I now had to, I had no utensils to eat out of the bag. So I had to over kind of liquefy it and drink it for the last 12 days. And as a consequence of that, I had this craving to just chew something. Yeah, I just wanted like a bit of salty meat. Yeah, a bit of seaweed. No, but I just wanted something to chew. Like that was coming up for me, you know. So it's like salty steak, something like that. That was very much, and Supermax, of course, as well.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. True Galway man.
Exactly.
Yeah. So do you think you're a lucky person? Or do you ever think about luck?
I don't know. I don't really connect massively like with the word. I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to that 17-year-old who made that decision, because everything I am has stemmed from that. I suppose I was lucky, now that it's coming up for me, that I lived beside a rugby club, and everybody in my everyone around my same age, you know, a few years older or younger, used trips up to Galwegians on a Saturday morning, and I just kind of followed that trend, and that sport gave me so much. You know, it was a boyhood dream to play professionally. So I've kind of, you know, I would say that very much lucky that way.
Yeah. What do you do to relax?
Read. Cold water. I love cold water, like getting into the sea. I mean, it's not very relaxing when you're in there, but when you come out, you have this, like, it's just, it recenters you, I think. And it just, you know, you can have the worst day in the world. You get your head into the seawater here, especially here I think we have an incredible resource here on the west coast of Ireland, and, you know, just go for a bathe and dip your head in, and you're a different person coming out, you know. So that's something that is quite, I find, a real good recentering thing.
Who do you admire and why?
There's a guy here, in Galway, called Liam Culnan. You know, and Liam had meningitis when he was 19, and he collapsed in his shower. He's a Scottish guy originally, but he lives here now for a long time. And some of you might recognize him. He used to at least cycle around on a three-wheel bike around town. I think he reckons he's been knocked off hundreds of times. Anyway, Liam, I find Liam incredibly inspirational. I used to see him, you know, he's very recognizable around Galway, and on the bike, and then up in Galway City Gym, he's always in there, and he needs a lot of he's very autonomous, but, you know, he clearly moves slow. So I remember just to see him, right, and you know, kind of building a picture of who this guy might be. But then I started to become friends with him, and found out his story, like, so getting meningitis, found 2 days later by his brother, and since that time he's been fighting this fight to regain his human capacities, you know, so relearning how to walk, relearning how to speak, and every day he is doing something to fight that fight and to regather his capabilities and capacities. And I find that attitude and the actions around that incredibly inspiring, you know. I feel like if we all had, you know, what he has at the tip of his little finger, like, it would just, generally the world would be a better place. And I find, you know, he ignites a lot of really kind of positive emotion in me when I see him and talk to him. So he's the guy.
Fantastic. What's the next adventure? Or is it a top secret?
Well, I don't have anything really, like, it takes
some ideas, lads.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing to understand here is, like, the emotional output, you know, the emotional energy that you go into. And I'm very content. I sit here very content with the way everything went, and the way I actioned out my values and my standards on board, you know, and lived to them when, you know, when there's nobody looking. And, you know, to be disciplined to the standards you set yourself, or to not be disciplined to the standards you set yourself, is easy, but you don't take that action. And, you know, you action out those high standards. So I came away from it incredibly happy and in no real rush to push myself into something else, because that emotional cup of energy is empty, and it takes time to refill and to reboot, and that's the phase now. In terms of just kind of challenging projects, I want to write a book. So that's probably, where I'll, without the physical output, that's where I'll put my energy.